can introduce, God forbid. Anyhow, I guess it's Josh Goldman? Yeah, at the WGB Macintosh Administrator with ACDC and ACMT, whatever that is. Huh?
I'll go over all that.
And whatever, yeah. So is it the but he's a Macintosh administrator, and he's going to discuss the Mac OS and whatever. So, go for it.
All right. Yeah, I'm Josh, and this is Mac OS 10. I'm going to spend a couple slides talking about myself, because I'm full of myself. Then I'll just kind of go over a real brief history of OS 10 and pre-OS 10, a little bit of OS 10 server, little bit on iOS. I don't know much about it. And then I have a bunch of the questions that were sent to me, and I kind of laid them out in slides and tried to answer some of them. At any time, please stop me, ask questions, yell at me, throw stuff at me. That's fine. That's pretty much it. I guess I'll get going. About me, education-wise, I have an MBA from Lakeland College. Before that, I got my BS in computer science at UW-Oshkosh, Computer Information Systems. Back then, everything was C, C++, some OpenGL, Scheme, ML, and everything was in Linux. So basically, that's how I first learned about it. Basically, they said, you're going to use Linux, you're going to program everything, you're going to use VI, have fun. And they gave us, I think we had a one-page cheat sheet on simple commands. So from there, we kind of picked it up. Later on, as a practicum, I configured the Linux server for computer science at Oshkosh. I think I made it a year after I left, and they wiped it and put Windows on it. But at the time, it was a domain controller. I'm CompTIA Network Plus certified. That's from a few years back. I have my ACTC, which is Apple Certified Technical Coordinator. That basically means from Apple, certified to set up servers and all that fun stuff. ACMT is Apple Certified Macintosh Technician. That allows me to perform certified warranty Apple Care repairs. We do all of our own repair at UW Green Bay, so I can fix our own Macs and Apple reimburses us for them. I also, just briefly, I have an HP self-maintainer certification because we are an HP shop, primarily a Windows shop, so I can repair HP machines. And at one point, I took a LPI, a Linux Professional Institute class. It was a class in Appleton. I never took the certification exam. You can't really see a need for it. Kind of my lifelong experience, I started when I was very young. My parents had computers. I don't know why they had them. They didn't know how to turn them on. I think they just accumulated them. And my first machines were running Amiga OS, and I had a machine running IBM DOS, really old. First real machine that we bought that worked was running MS-DOS. Eventually we got Windows 3.1, Windows 95. When I went to school at UWO, I worked at an academic computing, and there we were running Windows 2000 XP, and we were also running NetWare, originally 5, then 6, and 6.5. And then when I graduated from UWO, I worked there for 9 months as a network administrator and also a Windows Server administrator, because you're always administering Windows servers wherever you're working. And then one of the things I did there is I set up their first network cluster when they bought their new HP SAN, which would have been 2004. So I don't know if it's still there or not. After that job went away, and there was a job for a Mac administrator, and at that point I turned on a Mac about twice in my life and said, hey, I can do this. Talked myself into a job, and they kind of hired me from there. I guess they liked me. So from there I've been working since 10.4 to 10.6. Obviously 75% of my job is still running Windows machines, XP, 7. I do a very little bit of Linux support. I do all the Linux support, which is 2 computers on campus. I support, OS 10. We have clients, we have servers. We're running managed clients. We run Windows XP and 7. We're running Active Directory. We are basically a Windows shop, if anyone asks. And then, we're kind of the Macs are kind of the secondary thought. Of the 2 Linux servers I support, there's a NASA system that we run that they use to control the Mars rovers. So that's one thing I set up. I know Michael had a chance to use that too. And then just the computer science has a Linux server that every year they say, hey, put this version of Linux on, and we do for whatever reason, they wanted Ubuntu desktop this year. So we had Red Hat Enterprise last year, and Osam didn't like it. It's fine. And then, various enterprise systems I work on. Zythos was a web file system, Service Desk Express, just all sorts of various junk. So I'm a rounded person. I'm not just the lifelong Mac user. I really didn't use Macs until 2004. So I have the background. I played with Linux my whole college career. I had Linux servers running just to say that I did. So I kind of have a little bit of background, and I'm not an expert by any means. I just kind of know a little bit about everything.
Have you looked at SUSE from NetWare?
When I left, we were first not using, but we were testing out using running eDirectory on SUSE. And I used it actually before they got bought by Novell, way back when, just because I don't know where I got CDs from, but I happened to have them and ran it for a while. But I guess starting history, OS 9 and earlier, this is the stuff I really didn't touch. If you hear it referred to as Macintosh Classic OS, that they were running on the Motorola PowerPC architecture, the G4s, the G3s, and then before that they were just Motorola and the processor speed. It was pretty much no multi-user, no multitasking. You could keep things open. It was kind of like Windows 3.1. You could have this open, but whatever you clicked on to bring to the front of the screen was running. Later on in version 9, they had some primitive multitasking, but it wasn't really there. No protected memory. OS 9, if you ever used it, you'd see this bomb a lot. It would crash. It was just as buggy as the earlier versions of Windows were. And there were actually a fair amount of viruses for OS 9 and earlier because there was absolutely no passwords, no protection. It was just, you turned it on, there it was. Then there's really blurry. It's hard to find a high-res image of OS 9. This is the old, OS 9 screen, the old Finder, Apple file menu over there in the corner, which it's cut off. There were, you have your hard drive icon. So finally, this started well before 1999 with Next Computing when Steve Jobs had his own company. But in '99, back when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, they released OS 10. It's based on the XNU kernel. I don't know much about this, but I know it stands for X is not Unix. It was purchased by Apple. It's the base for Darwin. Darwin OS is the open source. It's a variant of BSD in the mock kernel, and you can download the Darwin and run it on whatever x86 system you want to. Because it's based on BSD, basically all the functionality, or most of the functionality you're used to in Linux, you can do in OS 10. You have a terminal window, you can SSH into them. A lot of stuff I do is in command line. When I first started working at UW Green Bay, I didn't know how to do anything on the Mac side, so I did everything through SSH, all my remote management, all that stuff. The interface, the GUI you see is referred to as the Aqua interface. It's just like any, it's obviously much more enhanced and refined than anything X11 does, but that's what it's referred to. And then if you want to, you can get the X11 environment as a free download from Apple to install on OS 10. Then you can run a lot of your traditional X11 applications. This Finder is what's referred to as, that's what your default file browser. I had to throw in that. It's like Windows Explorer to make the Linux guys happy. I thought you'd get a kick out of that. It's just your basic. There's different views. There's column view, which I call grown-up view. This is cover flow. I don't find much use for it. Then there's icon view, but it's your devices, places, searches, and then wherever your files are. Default folder structure. You'll have your hard drive. You'll basically have this small group of, you have your applications, which obviously your applications. Developer, that's kind of weird. That's there because of a Java update. Usually you wouldn't see the developer folder unless you install developer tools. Library controls all the settings for the computer, but it's kind of confusing because there's 3 library folders. There's the system library, this library, and user library, and you combine the 3, and that's what controls the system. like this main library, this kind of controls like your applications. Like if you have licenses for a software, it's going to be in there. You know, how the systems, you know, what your screen resolution, a lot of that stuff is in here. Inside the system folder, there's another library that has the critical system stuff that you need to turn the machine on. You could theoretically delete every single folder except for library, and the Mac would boot. And again, that was system. That's just a user guide. And then normally, by default, users is where the user folder is. Now, if you tell Finder to show all the hidden folders, this is where you can kind of see. Shows you its true Unix background. I mean, here's where you have your bin, Etsy, sbin, private temp. I mean, so you can see it truly is running BSD. It's just, the Apple wrapper on top of it. So if you want to modify the host config file, you can go to /etsy/hostconfig, put something there. You can put something in the cron. You have run cron jobs. I mean, that's all there. Not all of it's used. Some of it's replaced by Apple proprietary command line tools. But I mean, it's there. The file structure is there. So I mean, it's actually a very familiar OS. And it's easy to get used to if you're used to using Linux. Any questions at this point? Stop me if I'm going too fast or you can't hear me. User home folder. Basically, so here's my home folder. Applications. You can have applications specific to an individual user. Desktop is going to be what your desktop is. Documents, downloads. That's something from Word. Library. Again, this is where all your settings are for this individual user. So here you can see library preferences. This is a big one. Every application will have settings, and these are they make plist files. So everything you can see here are some Adobe software products. If you went down here, you'd see stuff from Microsoft. So for every user and every application you launch, there'll most likely be a preference that goes along with it, and that comes in handy later for troubleshooting. But otherwise, you have all cache folders, calendars, your favorites. Anything that wants to put any settings in their individual user, they'll go in there. And then, some more media, movies, music, pictures, and there's a public folder that any other user on the Mac, if you enable it, can throw stuff in there.
Are the text preferences text files or XML?
They are XML.
Okay.
So, and there is a built-in XML viewer, so you can get into them and tweak with them. And we do a little bit of that, but not too much. Usually, if I'm working on preference files, I'm deleting them and letting them recreate from scratch. Adobe's notorious for having their own plist files corrupt themselves, and then nothing works. Just kind of going more into it. Originally, when it was released in '99, it was running on the Power PCs. That was the G3, the G4. Those were Motorola's. And finally, IBM came out with the G5. That was the last Power PC processor. It was great. It had a ton of power. It sucked a lot of energy. That's why the G5 towers were this big. And that's why there was never a G5 laptop. They could never make one small enough to fit in a laptop. That's why even when they were making G5 towers, the laptops were still running G4s. And that was kind of one of the deciding factors when Apple said we need to get to a standard processor so we can pump out the volume. And they realized that everyone was going towards laptops. Laptops are the primary machine sold. So that's when they went to Intel. 10.4, I should go back a bit. When they switched to OS 10, everyone had OS 9 apps, and completely different architecture. You can't just click on one and expect it to run. So what they had was they had classic mode, which was basically a VM, an Apple proprietary VM that ran OS 9 inside of OS 10. So you click on it, you'd actually see a little window pop up just like you traditionally would with a VM. It would load up OS 9, make you run OS 9 apps on top of OS 10. That worked. It was happy up until about 10.4. When 10.5 came out, Apple finally said, all right, it's time to cut the cord. At that point, it had been 8 years since the switch to OS 10, and they said, if your developer hasn't rewritten their software to work in OS 10, they're not going to, and we can't support it anymore. So at 10.5, they cut support for classic mode, and that was leading up to 10.6, because 10.6 is only Intel hardware, and they couldn't run, because classic mode was still running natively on the hardware. So, I mean, they didn't want to port that over, so I'm sure there's some open source way to make OS 9 run in VM if you really want to. From Apple's standpoint, it's dead. Forget about it. With 10.6, because they got rid of the PowerPC information, I mean, they lowered the install footprint to 4 gigs, so it's a lot smaller now. It's more streamlined because you're only writing for one architecture. And then one of the big things they added on was it's called Grand Central Dispatch, and it handles multi-threading at the OS level. And I don't know the nuts and bolts of it, but basically what they tell us, what the sales pitch is, by having the OS handle multi-threading instead of individual apps, if the software developer is lazy and does not write their application to support multiple cores, it doesn't matter, the OS will do it for you. So while, Photoshop is still going to be written, be multi-core capable, a lot of the smaller apps, this will move stuff around and actually balance the cores out, so you're always getting maximum performance out of a multi-core system, which every Mac is now. So, small, from 2 cores up tight. Don't know how much the most souped up Mac Pro can run. I think you can get 2 6 or 8 core processors in it. Primary file system is HFS Plus. That's an Apple file system. Fully supports FAT32, so all your flash drives that are formatted FAT32, they work fine. Plug and play, drag and drop. Obviously, you have your FAT32 limitations. I think it's a 2 gig file size. It can read NTFS. By default, it won't write to it. But this might have changed. I'm not sure of that. But last time I checked, you cannot write to an NTFS partition. But there's an open source project, NTFS 3G, which if you install it, then you can write. You can plug in an external drive that's mounted NTFS, and you can read, write, do all that stuff to it.
So, we were talking about Open Solaris a few months back. We were talking about the NTSF and NFS v4 compatibility there, but this doesn't have that yet.
This does not have.
So basically, all you've got for permissions is the usual Linux.
Yeah.
777, 644.
There are plugins that you can get that rewrite the built-in Samba plugins, and you get full support. We use a product called AdmitMac from Thursby that gives you that. But yeah, natively out of the box, it's real limited. And I guess I don't know if it's licensing, because they have the technology base. They probably just don't want to pay a license to use it.
Can it read Linux AXT3 or?
I don't know if it would read it or not. I've never tried to plug a Linux partition. I have to imagine there'd be support for it.
Yeah, I think there would be. But.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Again, back to the Open Solaris discussion. What was that file system?
ZFS. Every time there's a new OS from Apple since 10.4, they've been saying they're going to actually switch. They're going to use ZFS. They're going to support it. And every year it doesn't happen.
But they're at least talking about it as a.
The people are always talking about it. It just never has worked its way in yet.
If they do, it's nice.
It's nice.
From what he talked about.
Have to probably deal with Oracle now, though.
Yeah. Apple and Oracle are fighting up over Java right now. I'm sure.
Over Java?
Yeah. Apple finally stopped releasing Java updates through their own servers just last week. They said, we're done. Java can handle their own updates, kind of like they do on a Windows machine. Because Apple used to redistribute Java through their software update service, and they're always a version behind because of it, so they kind of pulled the plug on that. Anything else with file system? Or?
No.
Do you have a flash drive format in?
I can make a MSD and exe3 if you want.
So if you want, at the end we can plug one in and see if the Mac burns up or yells at me or cries. So, OS 10 fully supports any LDAP v3 directory service. The big one, Active Directory. There is a built-in plugin for Active Directory. There is third-party plugins which work better than the built-in one. But anything, eDirectory, just running Open Directory's Apple solution. But any type of LDAP authentication you can use. It can bind to any file share that a Windows server is going to put out. You can connect to WebDAV, FTP. All the standard NFS, all the standard file systems are going to be supported on the Mac. They can't give you that line anymore that's not going to be compatible. Pretty much, if it works on a Windows machine, it's going to work on Mac.
Can you set up? I'm sorry. Did you want to?
Oh no, go right ahead.
Can you set up a ADDC Active Directory domain controller a la Windows Server 2008, but instead run it on here and it'll have the same functionality? You have all these Windows 7
Yeah, you can set up
authenticating.
You can
to
set
it.
up Open Directory, which is Apple's solution, to also be a domain controller.
Right.
It's not going to give you the full feature of everything that Active Directory gives you, but it will allow authentication. It will, network home directories. But I don't know if there's anything that really gives you the full, if you want the full featured Active Directory, group policy, all that stuff. I don't know if anything really does that. But basic binding and authentication, you can bind, and they'll think they're connected to a domain, and you're really connecting to the Mac because it's just Samba. So there's a SMB conf file.
Right, Samba plus a little bit.
Yeah.
I know with going back to SUSE or OpenSUSE, you could have a domain controller, but you had to make a couple little tweaks in Windows on the Windows 7 clients. Do you remember anything like that?
I have not done any binding to any type of open source. I haven't done any sort of binding to a Linux domain controller since XP, to be honest. So I have not tested anything with Windows 7, mainly because
or with your OS X, having to make the tweaks in the Windows 7, you don't know.
Yeah, because since we're running we're running 2008 domain controllers on campus.
Right.
And we're all buying. So so I'm gonna say so from that standpoint.
I just wondered if you.
I haven't had a chance to really look at it. And when you try bringing up domain controllers on someone else's domain, they get kind of. The Windows admins get really weird about that.
There's some protocols for that.
Yeah.
Who's gonna be the boss and who's gonna the master slave kind of thing.
Yeah. Apple uses cups printing. I believe they bought cups. I don't know if someone's been verified that. Did they not?
They bought the developer.
They bought the developer, so
the guy that made cups. They employ now.
And it says Apple on the bottom.
It does now.
Yeah.
So you can do there's a built-in printer utility, so for the happy home user, but you can go to the localhost :631, and it's the old-fashioned cups config page. You can access all your cups files, and I do that a little bit when I have to modify permissions in labs, so users can't mess up print queues. But it's all they said. It all comes back to everything's there if you're used to Unix or Linux. OS X server, basically based on the same background. There's 3 devices you can put OS X server on officially: the Mac Mini, the Mac Pro, and the Xserve. And then 2 weeks ago, the Xserve got end of life. So it's kind of a gray area. No one knows what's going to happen. What the support's going to be for the future of OS X server. My hope is they go virtual. We have a VMware virtual environment out for our Windows servers. I pray that's where they're going. I hope they're not going to get rid of OS X server. I don't think they will because there's too much management stuff that goes on with it. You can run it on a laptop if you really wanted to. Apple's not going to support you. Big surprise, because who runs a server from a laptop? They're thinking production environment. It'll install, it'll run fine, but not really server hardware. Big things. Like I said, Open Directory. Open Directory itself is an LDAP version 3 compliant directory server. And Windows, Linux, whatever combined to it. Workgroup management. Workgroup manager is for controlling user and computer policy. If you're familiar with Active Directory and group policy, kind of similar. You can control what the desktop environment looks like. You can control what users can do, what applications can launch. Very useful in a lab environment. Not so useful anywhere else because you really don't want to be restricting people if you don't have to. Go ahead.
Before you get too far away from it, I'm not familiar with the Mac, the platforms, the hardware. Can you say just a little bit about the Mac Mini, the Mac Pro? I guess you talked about the X.
Yeah, the Mac Mini is basically that's a little cube. It's about yay big. Mm-hmm. It's just it's supposed to be the entry level Mac, so it's priced cheaply at like $800.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just it's a Core 2 Duo. It's just a real basic little system. They have a special server edition which has 2 hard drives. It's just meant to be the real cheap little machine. People use it for media centers.
Okay.
It's just there is a separate Apple TV. You don't want to get mistaken, but it's just basically a little all-in-one unit that you plug in your own monitor, keyboard, mouse, and there it is. The Mac Pro is Apple's highest-end machine. They run the Xeon processors. They start at about $2,000. Those are the big towers you see now.
Those be enterprise
Yeah.
class.
Usually, you're buying one of those if enterprise, or if you're a graphic developers buy them because you can fit. They have PCI Express video. You can do the SLI stuff. You can I don't know how many gigs of RAM you can put in them because they have RAM cards. That's real professional series. There aren't many Macs I should add. There's the MacBook, MacBook Pro, the laptops. There's the iMac, which is the all-in-one with the monitor, and then there's the Mac Mini, Mac Pro, and there was an Xserve. I mean, that's basically what they have. They're really moving a lot towards the laptops. I'm sure you've seen the commercial for the MacBook Air, which is just a real thin strip.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
They show it from the side.
Yeah.
And it's holding it with 2 fingers.
But that's one thing with Apple is they don't, there's probably 8 models. That's all they have. Some people like it that way. Some people despise that. It's nice from a support standpoint because you only have to know 8 different machines to take apart. With HP, any given year there's probably 100 different models. So that's kind of a nightmare. And then just net boot services. You can hold an N on any Mac. You can net boot it. We use it for imaging. You can net boot. You can tell it to go re-image itself.
So you can run a Mac over a thin client? And
You can if you want to. They used to really promote it. Now they don't promote it as much. I'm sure it just as images get larger. But I've gone to training sessions where they'll actually, ironically, use a Mac laptop, and they'll go into a classroom that's for a private college, and they'll net boot them all to the laptop, and they'll run 20 machines as clients off of that one laptop.
Yeah. John, you gave that presentation on Pixie.
Yes.
Did you know at the time about the support here?
Okay. The Mac booting, I think, is slightly different from Pixie. A Mac server can serve Pixboot for a PC, but not the other way around. A Mac can't net boot to a PC. It's kind of weird. That's kind of Apple's lock. There's no physical reason why it shouldn't work. It just doesn't. And you can use a boot CD to get to a Linux or Windows-based Pixboot server. And there's a ton. This is what's great about the Mac, the OS 10. Or Mac in general, there are some awesome imaging tools. I'll show you some screenshots. I don't have anything running. There's stuff that, on the PC side you'd be paying thousands of dollars for, and it's just completely free on the Mac side as long as you already have the server. And the server itself is, I think, $500 or $1,000 for a server with unlimited client licenses. So it's, from a licensing standpoint, compared to a Windows system, it's actually very cost effective. This is just the view of server admin. This is kind of like your default, view of a server, showing you what services you're running, graphs, usage graphs, file sharing. I mean, this is just from here you can see if your green's running, red stop. If it's just grayed out, the service is installed but not configured. And you can just see this is just a screenshot I stole, so I don't know what they're running here, but you can run file servers, DHCP servers. I think I list a bunch at the next screen. All your standard services. You can run off a Mac server, and I believe HTTP is running off an Apache server. It runs a mail server, file services. You can treat it as a Windows file server. AFP is Apple's protocol. NFS. It can do your DNS, your DHCP, firewall. It can do XGrid, which is a cluster service by Apple, so you can distribute rendering. You can locally host updates for your Macs. If you have a lot of Macs, this is great for saving bandwidth. Obviously, you pull it onto there and it pushes it out.
The DHCP, it supports IPv6 as a server?
I went into the settings. I didn't turn it on because I didn't want to fight the campus DHCP server, but there was IPv6 settings in it. To be honest, like I said, I didn't have a chance to really dig into it. I actually have 2 new servers sitting waiting to be turned on. I just kind of got lost with time, but it looks like it supports it, but I don't want to mislead you and say you can do something that I don't know if it can or And then kind of moving into iOS, it's also based off Darwin. You can, if you jailbreak it, there's a terminal, there's all the good stuff. That's what the iPhone, iPod Touch, the iPad, and the Apple TV run. Primarily focused touchscreen interface. It's not really meant to have a keyboard, but you can use one. The one thing about iOS, as it comes from Apple, is it's designed around the App Store because it's designed to make money for Apple. So you don't, when you want to install an app, you go through the App Store, download it. I don't know much about iOS. I haven't done any development for it, so I'm really sketchy on details here. I'm sure you all heard jailbreaking iDevices. You can go to like third-party sites like Cydia, and you can get SSH and other non-approved apps. A lot of useful stuff out there. And supposedly, they're going to put some of the elements of iOS interface-wise into 10.7 line, which is going to be the new OS. Since I don't know much about iOS, this is my comment about that.
I'm sorry.
You guys going to read that? So, do you have any questions about iOS? I really I don't know much about it, but actually I will get into a few more things about management of that. But so that's I don't know much about the iOS.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah.
With jailbreaking your iDevices, older generations like the iPhone 2G, iPhone 3G, when you jailbreak it, you can actually install Android on the device, doing some fancy trickery.
Android, okay. I just got an Android device,
Yep.
Pan Digital novel.
Here's where I got kind of into your questions. The one question was, is there an easy way to mass deploy iPhones, iPads? No. I hate to say it, an iOS device is a one-to-one device. It's meant, you have an iPhone, it's yours. You have an iPad, it's yours. They were never really intended to be used in outside of their emails and calendaring. They were meant to be have a bank of them for checkout. And that comes back to the App Store, where the idea is that everyone has an iTunes account, that you buy stuff through the App Store, downloads to your machine or to your iDevice. That makes distribution a challenge because all you can really do is tell everyone to go and download it. You can issue vouchers. The newest thing is the App Store Volume Purchase Program. Right now it's for education only, but it might go private, which allows a company to buy a block of 100 licenses, and that could give you all a license voucher, and you could go with your personal account and get it. But the catch is, I give you a voucher, you went into iTunes under your account, you downloaded and installed that app is in your name now. You quit, you leave, I can't get that back. You own that app, which for especially like we're a state institution, and people love to nitpick what we do, that's huge, because we have no way of pulling that, especially if someone personally owns a device and wants to use it, they want the school to buy them a software license, we can't take it back from them. So that's kind of where we're at now. Every time I talk to my Apple guys, I complain. They always say they're working on something. We'll see. It'd have to be some sort of remote kill, which would probably be a whole other set of ethics and all that stuff. So that's the quick yes/no on that. Is there an easy way to deploy Mac OS 10? Yes. So there. Basically, if you have an OS 10 server and using NetBoot technologies, it's very easy. Using tools such as Deploy Studio, which is a workflow-based NetBoot server. What we do is I scan in barcodes when machines come in from Apple. I put them in a spreadsheet. I import them into Deploy Studio, and you turn the machines on. You hold an N, and you say go, and they put the campus image on. They name themselves. They bind themselves to Active Directory. They bind themselves to Open Directory. Basically, the machine's ready to go. So it's actually very simple to do once you get it set up. And then once you have systems in place, again, you have your VNC's built in, VNC server. Again, you have SSH. Do all your management. Apple Remote Desktop is a utility Apple release for controlling, managing, and deploying packages to machines. So there's a lot of a lot of management tools. It's very, very easy to control them. A lot of it's happy graphical interface stuff, which is great for people like me. You can manage machines in Open Directory. You can extend an Active Directory schema, and you can go directly into AD and do all your management. AD people don't like that. We do what's used to be called the Golden Triangle. We actually do a dual binding. We bind to Active Directory to get users from. We bind to Open Directory to get machine policy. So anytime you're bound to two directory servers, one's giving you a machine, one's giving you users. That works good because they're independent of each other. They don't mess each other up. And there's little overhead getting it set up. Just one directory server, which I think was $3,000.
And you can use this management package or packages to do any kind of configuration changes on the clients
Just
over the network?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you basically, if you set stuff, I'll show you some screenshots, and when they log in, they grab the policies, so you can set your control user environment. Otherwise, like I said, when it comes to like pushing software, you have SSH, you have some other tools too. But yeah, you can pretty much control just about anything. And I said, the old fallback, which is great, is you can always fall back to Unix. I have login hooks running that redirect full. I mean, if you can do it in Unix, you can probably do it. So that's kind of the beauty of it.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that workflow style?
Yeah, I have a picture of that in just a second,
Okay.
so we'll kind of talk about it, which is right here.
Okay.
This is Deploy Studio. This is a screenshot of it. It's a totally free program. I think it's based in France. It sits on top of your OS 10 server, and this is where you can do your imaging. You can do software install off a NetBooted machine. What's great is you just build building blocks into a workflow. So, like over here, you can see you can do set host name, network stuff. You can partition disks. You can install any Apple package. You can bring an image down. You can push an image up. You can do everything you want to do. And then, like I said, when all else fails, you can run a Unix script to do it. So as long as you know what you want to do, you can tell it to do it. I mean, I have ones that we have imaging ones. If you forget to install a package in your image, you don't have to rebuild your image. You just come into here and you add that as the last task is, install, Dreamweaver, because I'm an idiot and forgot it. And then when they clone, they'll install Dreamweaver and they're done for you. You can tell them to run software update on first boot. I mean, it's just really, it's kind of nice, the intuitive building it across, We have surplus machines. I have a Unix script that zeroes the disk out, so it's safe, and then it brings an image down, then it reboots it. So you can just really intuitive and easy to use. And you just have to think it through. And it's just, this has been a lifesaver for me. I mean, it just makes. And if someone has to reclone a machine down the road, if it's they host the OS up, which really I've never seen happen, but it can be done. You can just hold the N key in, click what you want, click play, and walk away in 20 minutes. It's recloned, back up and running, back on Active Directory. Life is all good. Does that kind of answer your workflow question, or
Well,
was there more?
we can talk about it a little.
Okay,
It's
sure.
It's some specific stuff.
And then this is the other tool I was talking about, Workgroup Manager. This is bound to Open Directory. This is kind of where you can group machines by, you can make labs up, and you can click on any of these devices. This is kind of like the control panel. You can say, well, I want my machines to all turn off at 10 o'clock. You can set that here. You can set, in the lab, you can say you only have these 4 printers. You're not going to circumvent my print system. So you can control a lot of stuff here. You can point to local software update services. You can lock them out of the control panel, system preferences. And then I don't have a picture of it. If you click on the details tab, it brings up like the behind the scenes stuff, and you can manually set entries for applications that are not supported. You can, I have ones for Microsoft Office, so when you launch it as a new user, it doesn't bring up the first time run, Anything because it comes all back to the P list that I talked about in the user environment. You can drag them into here, so anytime a user logs in, they get the P list from the server. It's kind of like, almost like setting up a mandatory profile in Active Directory, not quite like it. But it's just, and you can control users, you can control stuff at a computer level, group level, or user level. We don't do users, but if you wanted to, you could have all your users in Open Directory and not have any other directory service.
So is this controlling Windows box?
This will not control Windows. No, this is just for the Mac client.
Okay. Because you said Office, and it kind of like, whoa.
Well, we run Office right now. Now I'm working on 2011 on the Macs, so you got to have an Office product. So and we're licensed for it because we're the Microsoft shop. So
Oh,
and,
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Finish
I was
that.
going to say we said Office 2011 was released October 26th, and it's phenomenal. I've been running it. I have Outlook back, which makes me happy because we have Exchange, but it's very, very improved over the previous two releases.
Was that you, Tim, asking about Windows?
Mm-hmm.
You know, in my question
Yep.
previously about what all you can do with your Mac clients as far as management,
Mm-hmm.
what can you do with the, as far as managing the, other than
Yeah.
authenticating?
I
you
don't
have-
think there's much. I mean, it's whatever you can do in that SoundAccount file. That's all there is for managing Windows clients that I'm aware of. There
Yeah.
might be more, but that's
Okay.
again something I just haven't looked that deep into. But to the best of my knowledge, it's basically just your typical.
So this isn't going to be like a replacement for SUSE, OpenSUSE.
Probably not.
There-
I mean, how much? What do you control on your Windows clients from there?
I don't
Oh,
do it at
I'm
all.
just-
I'm just
Okay, no, I'm just.
yeah, right.
Yeah, like I said, from what I understand, you're not going to control too much on the actual. Like, you're not going to do group policy settings on your Windows clients using OS 10
And
server.
you're not going to be able to go in and tweak what is that awful thing called?
Registry.
Registry.
Yeah, no, you're not. Gonna
Okay,
be able
all
to.
right, all right.
On the flip side, if you if you have Active Directory and you don't want to buy an OS 10 server, you can extend the schema in Active Directory, and you can plug this into AD, and you can do all these settings in Active Directory. So your Macs will bind to AD, and this will control those extra things, so you don't have to have an Open Directory server. Like I said, usually Windows server admins do not want to extend the schema for anything because there's no go. Well, it used to be there was no going back. Now with Server 2008 or 2, I think you can go back. But it used to be once you did it, you were done, and you do not want to take down the Windows domain. You hear a lot of bad things. They yell at you. And then real briefly, the other control, this is Apple Remote Desktop. This is basically for once the machine's already up, you can control, you can connect to them if you don't want to use VNC. You can control a whole lab, you can reboot them, you can collect software usage. Again, send Unix commands. I mean, that's great. You can tell a whole room to run software update at once if you want to, because there's a Unix command for software update. You can push packages. Like I said, this is just kind of like it's a great help desk tool basically for controlling and managing your systems. Pretty basic. And this will run on your desktop. You don't have to run that on a server. That's just a end user thing. Then we got the good question. What technical ways is OS 10 different from Linux? To me, it's kind of asking how Linux differs from Unix. I mean, they're kind of based off the same thing. Yeah, there's a huge difference. If you ask a Unix guy why Linux is different, he'll probably tell you for an hour why those are different too. I mean, the biggest thing with OS 10 is the user interface. I mean, Aqua is why they're different. Because if you didn't have Aqua, this guy would boot up to a BSD prompts, and life would be good for everyone. So I mean, that's the thing. Aqua is the intuitive. I mean, it is the easiest to use user interface. Apple put all their money and all the research and development making it intuitive. So I mean, some people argue if they think it is or not, but generally that's where they're trying to make it as idiot-proof as possible. But of course, then they just build a better idiot. But, you go with that. OS 10 requires Apple hardware legally. I'm sure people hacked it. I mean, you can make it run on. You just need certain hardwares that it'll run on. Now, ever since they went to the Intel architecture, there's certain motherboards that will just run it, and OS 10 doesn't know any better. There's some other things you do some tweaking. But again, that's why OS 10 is so stable. One of the reasons, because it's Unix, but it's Unix on hardware that you know you're going to be running on. Apple knows when they make OS 10, we have to support these 20 machines, and that's it. So you can make everything, you can test everything. You know for the most part it's going to be stable. Side note, blue screens of death with Windows, 80% are video drivers. because Microsoft has no control over, or very little control over what crap video card companies put out. So it comes back, that's a stability, it's a benefit. A lot of people don't like it, but that's why you don't pay much for OS 10 either, because you're buying it with the hardware. I mean, that's a whole philosophical debate. OS 10, your primary package delivery is a PKG. I don't know, I know there's RPMs. I really haven't done much with package delivery with Linux lately. And again, you can push it through, you can install PKGs from a command line. OS 10 removes some command line features, adds other ones. These are the kind of big ones. Well, for me, software update connects to the Apple software update servers. DS config LDAP, that's directory services configure LDAP for binding. System profiler will give you a complete readout of everything installed on a Mac. Then you can grab that and get what you need out of it. Disk util is what you use to. You can check your RAID status. You can do all your repair. And that's, if stuff hits the fan, you can boot a Mac into Unix mode, single user mode, which is just the bare stripped on Unix, and you can do a lot of stuff, and you can fix it and get it resurrected because of a lot of the command line support. As for what they removed, Fortune is gone. Sorry, Michael. And there's other stuff that's it's not there, but most of the stuff, a lot of the stuff is there. Your editors are there. I don't know if Emacs is. I know VI is on because I use it all the time. Your SSH. It's like I said, it's still at some point or another Unix. What are some problems for sysadmins for Macs that are not problems on Windows? My biggest pet peeve is there's no wake on LAN. You can wake from sleep, and Apple's official standpoint is you should put machines to sleep and not shut them down. That's great. Welcome to the real world. We shut machines down. Obviously, all of our PCs wake up just fine from power off state. There's no reason that an Intel NIC and an Intel board won't do it. They just don't support it. Another big issue, and I know it's number 2 and it's funny, but this is true, finger pointing. Whenever there's an issue with one of my Macs, and I go talk to one of my Windows servers, the first answer is always, it's the Mac's fault. So you always have to be ready to prove that it's not your fault. That, I can't connect to this web app share. Well, it's because your Mac's broken. Okay, my Windows 7 machine couldn't either. Oh, now maybe it's a problem, a lot of vendors love to use the quickest excuse possible, especially with web apps. Whenever a vendor can back out of responsibility, they're going to. And if you're using any type of, if you're using virtual environments inside of a Mac, if you're running Windows, anything they can do to kind of back themselves out, they're going to. Limited troubleshooting. There's TechTool Pro, which is a great boot CD recovery. I think it's a boot flash drive now. But outside of that, there aren't. Apple comes with a hardware test CD, but there aren't really two really good in-depth troubleshooting utilities. Since I'm a Apple certified technician, I get access to the cool stuff. The Apple Service Diagnostic CDs. Those CDs you boot up, it will test every fan, it will test every sensor, it will test everything for me and let me know what's good or bad. But that's very limited for people that get to that. But like I said, if you know how to support Linux and Unix, you're going to be able to support Macs. I mean, if Firefox locked up the GUI, you can SSH into it, you can do a top, you can find a PID, you can kill it. It's all there, and it's there. So I mean, there's always a way to do it. Usually, unless the machine's totally locked up, which very seldom. Then that's my little picture on troubleshooting. This is how I feel at work all the time. It's always my fault, and you always got to prove to the Windows guys that it's something you've tested and you know it's not your fault. So. Did you have a question? No. Okay, sir. Is it trivial to get a Mac to connect to Windows? Basically, yes. I mean, I'll show you in Finder. Here's Go Connect to Server. Any Windows file share besides DFS shares, I should always add that in, you just connect to it. If you're bound to a directory server and it's the right one, it'll pass through your Kerberos credentials and you'll just connect like you mapped it out on the PC. If not, it'll ask you for username and password. It amounts of volume. Like I said, it does not support DFS, but then there's third-party apps that rewrite the SOMP implementation to give you better compatibility. I mean, Mac we use, it's not just for DFS shares, but it has more Active Directory options too. And one thing I don't want to plug at MidMac, but why I love them is when if I'm having an issue with file permissions on a Windows share, I'll capture a trace log, I'll send it to them, and they'll find out what the issue is, and they'll tell me how to tell the Windows guys to fix it, because that's all this company does is make plugins for Macs to connect to Windows servers. So it's kind of nice having someone there you can send a trace to, and they'll get back to you in an hour and tell you what's wrong.
Is it trivial to get a Mac to connect to Windows server for login, like not SSH, but whatever the Windows?
Oh, like remote desktop, like terminal services.
Yeah, I forget what it's called. There's a
Yeah, like you just want to connect to the desktop. You get a desktop environment, and you're using it.
right.
Yep, that's remote desktop, and that there's free from Microsoft. You can download the remote desktop client, and we use it extensively. It's actually on a list of free stuff that I added on this slide. So yeah, it's very, just like you would on a PC. You open it up, you give it your IP address or DNS name, and you log into it.
And if the port is open, over your firewall, then you can do it remotely even?
As long as it's already set up. So if basically, guys, if you can get your PC to connect to your Windows server, you can get your Mac to do it. I mean, it's pretty much as long as everything's already open and in place, you can do it.
And can you get your Macs to connect to PCs? Whatever. I'll have to look at what that's called in Microsoft world.
I mean, the Microsoft Terminal Services, which is their big, like you go to a web page, you can log into your servers and use them. That all works. Obviously, you can directly map to the C drive on any Windows machine. You can use VNC if you want to. So I mean, you basically have all your main ways of connecting that if you're going to do remote troubleshooting, all those options are there.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I said, any other standard protocol would need to go connect to server. Your WebDAV shares, NFS, if you're still using NFS. Bless you, AFP, anything else. It's basically, it's all there. Here's your question about IPv6. And I'm sorry, like I said, I didn't quite understand. I mean, OSN client fully supports connecting to it. Enable and disable it. I mean, that's just the basic. And like I said, when I check the support stuff, OS X server DHCP is supposed to fully support IPv6, but I can't guarantee you that.
It says here on this web, Mac OS X implements its IPv6 functionality from COM-A stack, probably taking over relevant parts from FreeBSD.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. So yeah, like I said, I would have been shocked if they didn't. I mean, that's just based on the...
And this was reviewed release 10.4.8.
Yeah, so that's two versions older.
Okay.
We don't really need DHCP to get an IP address off with IP version 6. You need DHCP if you want other services.
Yeah.
That's probably right.
And I haven't really worked much with IPv6, so I'm not really up to speed on that. So. No,
is anybody actually?
Yeah, I know.
Right.
We have a class B at work where we have plenty of IP addresses, so we're going to be we're not going to care for a while. Mac trip. So you find useful such as tethering. I don't do any tethering. I never tried it. Oh, sorry.
To go back to IPv6, it's not just the number of addresses available. There's a lot of functionality there, especially IPsec.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I wanted to discuss maybe in another meeting.
Oh, I think it's a wonderful idea. Just
of,
the thing is, you can't be the only person running IP version 6. It doesn't
right,
really accomplish a whole lot.
Right, I agree. But there is a whole lot there.
Oh, I know there's a lot. Yeah, but I'm saying that's one of the reasons why a lot of people...
I mean, I think it's wonderful, just like I think we should convert to the metric system, but it's just like I can't be the only person.
Well, yeah.
Matt said, when it comes to tethering, I've never tried it, so I'm not even going to try to give you guys a line on that. So, general Mac tricks is you got to know your shortcut keys. The command key is the Apple key traditionally. Now it's just a little figurine thingy. Command O is open, command Q is quick. I'm going to give you this PowerPoint, so I mean, but it's just basically it's kind of like you have to give. If you use Windows, you're used to window key E, window key this, window key that. There's basically a command key that does the same thing. More importantly, are startup keys. when you turn a Mac on, there's no BIOS screen. It's just there's a gray screen, and then you're booting. So you need to know the key commands if you want to do anything troubleshooting wise. Command S is the most important. Well, one of the most important ones. If you hold that in when you turn a machine on, it boots directly into the Darwin, BSD, whatever you want to call it. There's no GUI. It doesn't even mount the drive in a read. It mounts the drive read only. It's just real stripped down, so you can, if your directory structures just are screwed up, you can repair the directory. You can repair permissions. You can you can go in and delete any file if you really had to. If there's something malicious or something you just didn't want, you couldn't get rid of. All your Unix stuff. Holding N does a network boot, so it's just like your F12 PIX boot on a PC. C boots the optical drive. It's a holdover from booting to a CD. T boots into target mode. This is on Macs with FireWire. If you hold in T and plug it in, it basically turns your Mac into an external hard drive, which it makes it really easy to copy files back and forth. And as additional bonus, if you have a machine with no CD drive or a bad CD drive, you can target boot another machine, pop the CD in there, and it'll read it over on the other machine. It's not as big of a deal as it used to be, because most things aren't on CDs anyways, but especially when everything was still being released on CD, it was great if you had, like I said, it always comes down to lab machines, and you're not going to go replace, 3-year-old CD drives just to install one program. So.
Yeah, are there many viruses on Mac?
I will tell you, there are Trojans out there. As for a self-replicating virus, I don't think there are any right now.
Because it's like Linux.
It's Linux.
Yeah, so it shouldn't have it.
There shouldn't be any. The biggest one that's going around, that went around was a Trojan that said it was a video codec when you went to certain sites of ill repute and said, hey, you got to download this video driver. It was a PKG. So you double-click, you install it, you give it authentication, and it would put a DNS switcher in. That would, take you to more malicious sites and try to steal your... That's pretty much the worst thing out there right now. There were also viruses out. There was one that targeted Microsoft Office, go figure. And that would just basically, if you got infected, it would infect all your Word documents that you open. And eventually the hope was it would get to a PC, because your Mac would just be the carrier. Then it got to the PC and did all the damage. So, like I say, with the Unix file permissions and just the security in there, there really is nothing right now. That's not going to say that there isn't. I'm not one of those arrogant people that think, there's never going to be a virus. Someone will eventually figure something out before Apple has a chance to patch it, but in the meantime, it's still pretty safe.
So, do you not have antivirus installed on any of your Macs?
Actually, I did for a while, and I had to take it off because antivirus programs run like crap on Linux. At least the ones that are ported to the Mac. Just with all the file I/O, we ran McAfee, and it drug them to a halt. So I actually had to pull it off because what would happen was it would try to scan network shares and wouldn't stop. And you basically take on your network shares, and we have all of our files on network locations. Well, why is my machine kicking me off the network? I don't know, So we pulled it off. My kind of arrogant view at the moment is our Windows servers have antivirus, and that's where all your data is supposed to be stored. So if you got something, the server's going to pick it up. I always evaluate new products. I'm evaluating Sophos right now. It's halfway decent. It doesn't kill your machine, but until they get something that's going to run better. I know I've tried out Symantec, so-so, but it's just, you're not going to run a complete hard drive scan on a Unix machine. There's millions of files, and so it's at this point we don't.
But otherwise, you haven't ran across a virus outbreak or anything.
No,
because of not running it.
not yet.
Do you, on all your Windows boxes, do you have antivirus?
We run McAfee, EPO managed. We've actually been fighting with it because it's been letting a lot of stuff through. We just upped all of our settings and it's finally starting to pick up all the fake AV. Right now we got hit by a lot of fake AVs for a few machines a week, probably more. At one point we were doing a few machines a day. They're getting taken down by fake AVs. Yeah.
I want to point out too that ESET is also has made an antivirus for right now.
Who's that?
ESET, these people who make NRD 32,
Okay.
which is pretty good.
From what I've been reading, though, that I don't think that any of the antiviruses are keeping up. Even the best of them are like
Yeah.
80-90% or something.
Yeah. I mean, and the biggest reason for running antivirus on Mac is to be a good citizen, keep your PC users happy. Because that way you can strip out viruses that are intended for them. I mean, that's... Because that way you're not sending them viruses, so you're being nice, but instead of actual infections on the Mac, none that I'm aware of. Like I said, a true self-propagating virus. And then kind of bring it quickly back to the boot menu. Holding an option key brings up a boot menu, where if it'll bring up nice pictures because it's Mac, CD drive, network is available, and your hard drives. Otherwise, these run EFI. There's an open source program called Refit that if you install, will actually, when you turn the machine on, it'll bring up every time a boot selector, and you can tweak, what partition to boot to and all that. We use that in our dual boot labs, so when you turn the machine on, you can choose between Windows and Mac. As for maintenance and repair, first place, which is usually disk utility. Disk utility, you can check your file structure. If your machine got turned off incorrectly, someone pulled the cord, you might have corrupted that. Otherwise, file permissions, go through and check permissions on the known. It doesn't fix every permission because it doesn't know what every permission is, but when you install a PKG file, it writes a receipt file to a receipt folder that keeps track of what the permissions are supposed to be, and it'll check them across each other. So for whatever reason, Office is my favorite because it likes to do the most things wrong. You're running PowerPoint for whatever reason. PowerPoint switched its permissions so you can't open it anymore. You run a permission repair. Also, Apple updates sometimes will mix up their permissions. Not as much as it used to be. I mean, it used to happen a lot more in 10.3 and 10.4. 10.5 and 10.6, I really haven't had any machines really get to the point where they won't boot, besides in cases of complete hardware failure. But those are there. And again, that can be ran from single user mode in the command line. So as long as the machine turns on, you can usually run it. Apple hardware test comes on a CD. It's usually a hidden partition on a lot of machines too. And that will test the hardware side of things. It's basic. It's not going to test every single device, but that's usually the first place to check for a hardware issue. And from there, you either have to have Tech Tool or you have to have the Apple Service Diagnostic CDs or take it to an Apple provider. That's one of those downsides. It's not as simple as troubleshooting a PC. Applejack is a cool program. If you run a Mac, you should get Applejack. It doesn't do anything by itself. It's a collection of all these scripts, and it does everything for you. So you can boot up to command single user mode, type in Applejack, and type in auto, and it will clean your cache, your Unix cache. It'll clean your font cache. It'll verify your permissions. It'll do all that stuff, and it also has a version of Memtest 86 on it. It's just a totally free program, and you can scan the machine, get it running, walk away, come back 3 hours and see if it's good or not. Just nice little utility. Here, Onyx is another good program. Onyx is more. This is for when you're actually booted up to the OS. This is more maintenance than it is repair. This you can schedule cleanup scripts. I mean, basically there's a GUI cron in it. I mean, if you change stuff, you're changing the cron tab. But and you can set user stuff. Has anyone ever used Tweak UI on a PC? It's kind of like Tweak UI. You can tweak all the user environment variables. So again, it's cool, but you get yourself in trouble. But it's just a lot of stuff. System user fun. Again, it's free or technically donation where they ask you for money. And if you use it, it's always nice to donate a little bit. And then the plist files, which I talked about, that's just manual. Every program has plist files. A lot of times if an app won't launch, first thing I do is I delete the plist files for that user. Or, and if that doesn't work, I might log out and log in as a different user, see if you can isolate it to a user problem or, make it a machine problem. And you can use, you find the appropriate plist. You're usually pretty safe deleting them. The proper way to be, copying them to your desktop so you don't lose them in case for something important. But the one thing is, this is where people get confused. You guys probably don't get confused, but the average Mac user does. There's user, tilde user library preferences, and there's system library preferences, and there's the other library preferences. And depending on what level you're deleting stuff at, you might actually be deleting important stuff. So you don't want to just arbitrarily search for plist and delete them. You're going to do something bad.
Can you say again, the P list is what?
P lists are kind of, I think it's this preference list. It's an XML file that, I'll go back to this slide. That's just basically like in your user preferences folder, there's P list files for every single application, every user setting. Everything you do ends up being written to a P list file. If you change your dock icon, the dock P list gets changed. So it's basically all your setting files.
Is dot file, I think,
It's like an in file.
Yeah,
It's
they're
like a
registry.
registry on Windows, right?
They're kind of like the registry, but they're individual files, which is nice because the registry, it's all or nothing. You screw it up,
it's dot
it's
index,
done.
dot
With this, they said when the great one was Adobe Creative Suite, it wouldn't launch. Well, you just go and delete Adobe Creative Suite Photoshop.plist, and that'll give you a fresh setup of Adobe.
Would this have anything to do with the trying to extend the Unix Linux permissions that are not available in
No,
Windows?
it's more like how in Linux everything's a file. So in order to save any of your settings, you need to write them to a file. This is the way how Apple saves their settings.
Yes.
The settings for
Anything.
Anything.
Applications.
application, anything.
Yep.
Applications, user settings,
Yeah.
policy-based stuff.
Well, right, but could this be a way to implement some of that functionality of NFS 4 that they don't currently?
You would probably need specific programs to do that, to extend it. I would assume.
Yeah, that I would.
Okay.
And I just got a couple screenshots on it. It's just like I said. That's what I love about Apple stuff. It's just they lay it out as simple as possible. So cleaning, it tells you what are you cleaning, your boot, kernel, cups, it's just pretty simple. I think if you go to, don't have the maintenance tab, it'll show you the cron stuff. But it's just real basic. What do you want to do? What are you trying to tweak? There's a lot there, but it's just real simple little tweaks. So you don't have to try to manipulate it by command line or anything else. Again, for being free, it's a pretty cool program. And then more in the maintenance repair. Another important thing is people call it zapping the param or resetting the PRAM param. That's your volatile memory storing your startup disk, sound, screen settings. Again, it's not as good as, it doesn't do as much as it used to be just because machines are a lot more reliable, but especially older machines, G5s would love to get confused what startup disk there was, and it would boot up and say, I don't have a startup disk at all, and just blink at you. And sometimes doing this, holding Command Option P and R, you turn it on, it chimes, it reboots, it chimes again. It just resets some settings. When it comes to actual hardware replacements, iFixit.com is an awesome website. They have full-color take-apart manuals for Macs, servers, even your iPods. They show you picture by picture how to take them apart, and of course order parts for them. A lot of stuff is standard, RAM is RAM. It's an Intel system. Hard drive is a hard drive. Optical drives, they're a little proprietary, but you can find them. They use them in other systems. LCD panels, that's going to be all your typical generic PC stuff. Video cards are a little tricky because while it's a PCI Express slot, not every video card is going to work with a Mac, so you have to make sure if you're going to buy your own video card, it's Mac supported. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems. Usually, you just use normal tools. You really want to get a set of high precision screwdrivers. If you don't, you need to go out and buy the jeweler sets because they're the really, really tiny, fine Phillipses that you think you can get a new, but you can't, and then you just strip them out. So, and a torque set if you're going to be taking apart iMacs. And then also, if you're going to take apart an iMac, you need suction cups because that big glass panel is just magnetically held in, and you just pull it straight off. But besides that, once you get that off, it's taking apart a laptop or a PC like you would imagine. And the general things you can start before switching. Obviously, all your software is not going to work anymore. You're gonna, and some stuff. I think with Adobe, you might be able to use a license cross-platform if you get the different version. But like If you want Office, you're going to have to buy a new copy of Office. If you know, whatever there is, you're probably going to have to buy a new version. If you need Internet Explorer and you don't want to run a virtual machine, it's not going to work for you. IE just doesn't work, which is a good thing in my opinion, but unfortunately, a lot of web apps which are supposed to be universal require IE because of ActiveX and all that junk. So if you need Internet Explorer, you might have to look somewhere else, or as I said, consider a virtual machine. And gaming support. If you're a gamer, not many games, although it has gotten a lot better. Steam is now supported, but you know, reality is, I'm sure you guys don't know, most games are, you know, PC, Windows. That it's a new OS. I mean, they consider OS tend to be the most intuitive, but it's not if you used a PC for 20 years. I have some, you know, clients and faculty who retired and they're like, I want to buy an iMac because it's easy to use, and they buy it and they're totally lost because they used Windows their whole life. And it's like, well, you know, I think once you use them, I mean, I didn't buy my first Mac until 2 years ago. Like I said, I was a PC, I was Windows, I was Linux, and I started supporting Macs, and it took me 2 years to finally break down and buy one. Now that I have one, I love it, and I'd probably buy another one if this one dies, you know. But it's a learning curve. I mean, there's always going to be stuff that's going to really piss you off because you could do it really easily in, you know, somewhere else. And then just, you know, a whole list of freeware, shareware, donation, whatever you want to call it. Text Wrangler is an excellent text editor. Simply Burns is disk burning software if you're used to using like a traditional rock seal with, you know, nice drag and drop, show you how much space you're using. Applejack, I talked about. Onyx. Handbrake if you're going to do video converting. That's cross-platform. You can get that for anything. Audacity. Mac the Ripper. They have a lot of funny names. That's for DVD decryption if you want to, you know, make a legal backup of your DVD. OpenOffice has a Mac version, so you don't have to buy Microsoft Office. Chicken of the VNC is a VNC viewer, although now with the newest version of OS 10, both sides of it are built in. You don't need to use a standalone VNC viewer. More stuff, you know, Microsoft Remote Desktop. If you need to connect to a Windows machine, it's there. You download it from Microsoft. Adium is a nice multi-service chat client. Menu meters, I'll show you when I close out of this. Basically shows you across your menu bar all your little graphs and charts and usage. You know, Sophos AV, I just put it out there. It seems to work. I've been trying to see if it finds anything on my machine. So far it hasn't. You have your typical open source web browsers, you know, Firefox, Chrome, Opera, which is an open source. Deploy Studio is the booting. Like I said, this will just give you all. WinClone's a real simple. If you have a Windows partition, if you have a dual boot system, you can quickly clone a Windows partition. Carbon Copy Cloner is a simple cloning tool for the Mac. So if you buy a new hard drive, you can use that and just copy it.
You can use Unix DE, right?
Yes. Okay. Actually, a lot like Carbon Copy Cloner is just using that. You know, or actually, I don't think it's DD. Apple created ASR, which is kind of their implementation. So, but it's another command line thing you can do if you know how to know the commands. And then Pacifist, which is this is actually really cool. You can extract individual files off it, install DVD. When you buy a new Mac, it comes probably with like iLife and some other stuff that is only supposed to go on that Mac. Say you have another Mac and you, of course, legally want to put stuff on there. You pop the CD in over there, and it's going to say this is not the right version of hardware. So use Pacifist, and it extracts individual files out of installers. I think it'll work with other ones too, but we use it for getting stuff off of installed DVDs. And then finally, links. You have my email. Feel free, if you have a question or follow-up, email me. I'm more than happy to help. You know, it's nice working at a college. They don't get mad if we help people out. You know, I'm not going to get yelled at for misuse of my campus email. AFP 548 is a great server site. MacFixit is a support site. CNET bought it last year. It's kind of gone downhill, but it's still there. Mac Rumors, even though it's a rumor site, there are a lot of good support forums. And then iFixit. And that is my presentation.
So whatever happened to the guy that found the iPhone and they arrested him? He's working for CNET or I don't know.
Maybe he disappeared.
Apple.
Yeah.
Broke his knees.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of your early slides,
Okay.
maybe slide 5 or 10 or whatever. I think you referred to WebDAV,
Yeah.
authoring and versioning, extended version of HTTP methods.
Yeah, I mean, the basic supports is if you need to connect to a WebDAV-enabled file share. I know, like, we use it as a secure way to access your files off campus. As for hosting it, I'm not sure. I believe you can, but again, I'm not going to.
Oh.
But, from a quick, just,
Would you say there's an Apache HTTP server?
that's
Is
what
that right?
that's what OS 10 server's web server is.
Right, and I wonder if they extended that then to include the methods and the headers and
I'm sure
whatever else of WebDAV,
Yeah.
if that's the way they did it.
I'm sure it probably is. Like I said, most of this stuff is all based off of the open source stuff. So. Of course, many meters on the rating because it's the resolution. What else was I going to show you?
I got an EXT2.
Oh yeah, do you have the? Do you have an SD card reader? Just specify.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of built into the EAAA.
This one, not so much.
We must have one.
I can try it on mine. I might have one.
Oh, yeah, that works.
We're kind of getting back to your P list question too. I can kind of show you. Like I said, here's my user library. So preferences. So for every
I don't know. We're checking on Mac.
well, for every like application
Yeah,
I
it's a
run,
Hackintosh.
and even like settings for the Apple environment, there's P lists. So this is the Apple stuff: console settings, Bluetooth settings, and if you get down, Microsoft settings.
Is this XML?
These are XML.
No.
No, they're not.
Oh,
I mean, you have one?
that doesn't work.
Yeah,
That's
that's
not
XML.
That's X.
Says
Yeah, look the first
this
time.
here
Yeah.
is not readable
You
by
have-
this computer.
Oh, I thought you were talking about last. Sorry. Yeah,
Do you have one of these for every file?
Well, not every file, but every application that would.
Every
Anything that would
application.
need to save preferences. So if anything that's going to save, like, how is this application
You're
run?
actually going to get up.
What's your any environmental variable? There's no one else to save it. Just So I mean, so there's tons. Like I said. And if you know what you're doing, you can tweak some of these. I haven't. I
Go in
actually.
there directly instead of into the application
Yeah.
or an application manager.
But the nice thing is you can push these in using that worker manager I showed earlier. So say I set it up on this machine, I can push that to my whole lab so they all have that same preference file. So it's kind of a way you can manage. So, especially my favorite example is the Office first time launch. You don't want every user, every student to go through the welcome to Office. You want me to do the customers. Sure. I don't know if Office the newest version will work with it. The newest version of Office. It's supposed to have a lot more functionality, but unfortunately we don't have a SharePoint server. We have a Cyclo server, which is nowhere close to as cool. But
There's some stuff in here about enabling Google, enabling WebDAV on Apache, and it mentions Mac OS X, so I guess it's just pretty straightforward.
yeah.
What you would do on in the server, whether it's OS X or who knows what kind of
Yeah.
So how many people support GB?
I mean, I'm the primary support, but I train all the help desk workers, and I'm working on getting them back up to speed. So when I leave or figure out over by a bus or something, that I'm in the water. It's always been kind of a, and for me, it's only half of my job description is Mac support. It really only ends up being maybe a quarter of my time to spend, not even.
We've just been telling people the Macs don't do it because they're better.
Yeah. Thanks. But I mean, really, not to be like in the last 3 years, I have not had any corrupt OSs. I mean, I've had, like I said, hardware failures with PCs, but they're hardware. But I haven't had any kernel panics that would make me have to recall the machine. They pretty much just run because they're Unix. But, you know, the biggest thing is user issues because for whatever reason, Mac users can sometimes be troublesome in general.
So you prefer the Unix environment over Windows?
I prefer whatever's best for the task at hand, I guess. You know,
Okay.
if I'm at home surfing the net, I'm just as happy using probably Windows in Firefox, you know. But like I said, I like using this, but I mean, it's not. There's times I switch back to the PC because some stuff, you know, it just works better on the PC. Some stuff works better wherever. But
Again, question about WebDAV. You say you use it,
we use it on campus there.
and what did you say you use?
We connect all of our Windows servers and all of our personal shares are WebDAV enabled. So like right now I can go to my connect server, type in the server address, and it connects via WebDAV to my Windows file share. So I can show you right now. So I can go on the Wi-Fi here still.
Oh.
I mean, like right here, this is the connect to server. You connect to Windows or whatever. So this is saying connect to a server of type, you know, HTTPS. And assuming that, sure, this is completely secure. What?
His address.
It's kind of bulky. WebDAV is not a fast file server.
I don't.
Did you?
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't install the part that
It says work just fine.
there's 2 parts. There's Firefox and but I looked over there.
Okay.
So, I mean, this would, it's obviously unhappy with something, but it would mount, you know, a volume on the desktop, just like, you know, would if you connected to a Windows share. And, you know, it's all based off of /volume / you know, off of
All right,
point. So
Okay, all right. So this is, yeah.
and I don't know why it's not working on here, but
Oh yeah, they still have
okay.
Yes, they won't switch the
Any
computer.
questions? Like I said, I'll make sure Michael gets this PowerPoint up on your website, and because I'm serious. Feel free to shoot me any questions or anything.
So would you be interested in doing a little experiment with IPv6 there?
If you send me what you want me to try, I could.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do have a couple machines that are not yet in production, so I might be able to pull it off in December. So I'm not going to put a frame up.
Right. If you've got the time, and if
Yeah.
nobody there is going to scream about it.
I should be able to pull it off.
There are web pages that you can go to that are enabled, or I don't know whether it's the whole server or just specific web pages that are IPv6 enabled.
Okay.
And if you have your browser set up a certain way, and I don't know exactly what's going on there, but I'm trying to.
That I don't know if I can do because we'd still be going outside to our, using our campus IPv4.
Well, I don't think that matters.
Well, send me what you
I
want.
think it's.
And I'll talk